Hey everyone, and welcome back to another conversation in our Voices from the Field series. This is going to be a great episode, and I can't wait for you to be a part of this very special conversation. Today's guest is someone I've known for a while and whose work I've been following for a good bit of time, and I've come to really appreciate the way he pushes on what math class can be. He brings a mix of honesty, a little disruption, and care that I think a lot of us need right now. Nolan, welcome to Voices from the Field.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So if you don't know Nolan, he's a former high school math teacher and current math success manager with InnovaMat. In his work, Nolan partners with schools and educators to rethink what math learning can look like with a concerted focus on student identity and joy. We'll stick on those two topics a lot today. He's someone who's not afraid to question longstanding practices, from grading to participation to what counts as success in math class. Nolan invites us to take a closer look at the systems that we have built and ask who they are really serving. He's also someone who thinks deeply and values relationship and community, and that comes through in everything he does with teachers and students. Nolan, I am so excited to have you here. Let's dive in. Sound good?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, let's start with your path. So you began as a high school teacher, and now you are working with schools across lots of different contexts. Many of them are elementary schools. What are some of the experiences that have most shaped the way you think about math education today?
Ooh, boy. Well, there's experiences across the whole range. So I can go back to early career experiences where I feel like, well, I didn't have a lot of support in my particular environment, so I was just doing what seemed best to me. And we had traditional textbooks. We had a lack of resources in terms of manipulatives or other things. A manipulative was a piece of graph paper, I guess. And that was pretty traditional, and we made our best and leveraged a lot of the relationships that we had. In more recent years, I've had chances to look at math across a different variety and sort of see that it isn't the case that we just tolerate that a lot of kids don't do well in math class and think that's just the way it is. We've got to be challenging the environment and the circumstances where not every kid has a real shot at success and wonder like, what's going on? Why is that the case? So learning more about how students learn math has been transformative for me, making connections within our math ed space to learn from others, reading more books, articles, attending conference workshops. These things have made a huge impact on me just by exposing me to things I wasn't aware of, maybe didn't pick up through my teaching career, didn't have access to in the buildings I was working.
Yeah. You and I have talked a lot about how powerful the sort of Twitter movement was in our own personal paths, our own
Yeah.
professional growth. Talk a little bit about where that fit into your journey and how that sort of helped you feel like, I mean, because the way you've talked to me about it is like this connection to a bigger community, right? So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about how that impacted your path.
Yeah, and I was a really late bloomer to that community. So even, as a educator working in Southern California, for years I had heard all about the CMC conference in Palm Springs and teachers raving about it. And I thought, that sounds really great, but I never went. I never had anyone pushing me to go. I didn't know folks that were like super close to me that were going that said come too. And I don't think I attended my first one until 2019, I think.
Okay.
Maybe 2020. It might have been a virtual one, might have been the first one. And so it was actually I remember now, it was CMC North 2019 that was December, was the first year
Yeah.
I finally said, well, let's see what this Twitter thing is about that everyone's been talking about. And that was sort of right before we made the downhill slide.
Yeah.
But I made up for lost time. I leveraged contacts. I was sliding into everybody's DMs to learn more, to connect, to tell them how much their writings or their sessions had been instrumental in building my thinking. And it's just been that was a great opportunity for me to sort of build my network, even though late in the game, and put myself in a spot where I was just continuing to learn and learn and know that there was so much more out there that I just hadn't encountered.
Yeah. And you pushed in that community too. Like I hear you saying how much you learned and I agree with you, but I really felt like I got to know you from a space of really pushing on all of us to think about systems, the systems that we created is the way that you talk about it, right? So like
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about how you feel like maybe you contributed to that community. I know we're all very humble in this, but I feel like what did you
Sure.
bring to that community? How did you help us all kind of rethink the work we were doing?
Well, I guess it's a mixture of exploring like the canonical content, right, from a high school lens, if it's factoring or solving equations or whatever it is, and trying to look at it from a new lens of like, A, why are we valuing this, right? Why is this a priority in our standards, or do we believe it still might be, even if it's de-emphasized? But also, B, how can we make this more accessible and meaningful? And then on the other end of it, from the systems side, like I've been really uh, skeptical, critical of grading systems and the impact that they have on students' identities. Since my early years, I've been trying out different things, exploring different ways, and always knowing that like the cold hard calculations that were happening in the gradebook didn't necessarily feel like the authentic truth of student learning. And so trying to find a way that like the system that we were expected to use and that students were grown up under understanding something meaningful out of it. I put
Mhm.
air quotes around that word meaningful right there. Um, was something that we could rethink and challenge and see where students' voices could come into that. So I did a lot of work in ungrading back in those 2018 or so days, and since
Mhm.
then, still thinking about it a lot, and trying to find that balance between what folks are willing to give up in terms of things that either are expected of them, in terms of like you have to do 3 entries in a gradebook per week, you have to
Mhm.
follow this convention of blah blah blah, versus meeting where their values align and seeing where we can push on things.
Yeah. Let's stay here for a minute because I know this is a passion of yours, but I feel like talking to the elementary folks, grading was a lot. It aligns more with the way you're talking about it. But like you were in high school talking about this, and my perception of high school teachers is like this. Let me rephrase that. My perception of many high school teachers, not all high school teachers, is this sort of no, you got these 8 scores. I averaged them up. That's what you get because that's the way it works. So like, how did you? Or or were you able to like help folks kind of relearn how we can think about grading? What were some things that were successful for those people who were really adamant that like, no, this is what we have to do?
Well, the moment where I was looking into these kind of practices was the same moment that like standards-based grading or mastery grading was
Mm.
sort of taking off as an idea. So people were in a mindset of what does it mean to think about equity issues in the context of grades?
Yeah.
If I'm going to make a hot take here or a bold statement, I think that we've got baby steps in terms of our progress and thinking of how standards-based grading can go, but I still have to push back a little bit on like whose standards are these? Why,
Mm.
how, like it still feels like it's not a very student-centered approach. And I get there's like a lot of tensions involved in it, so it's a very nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
But I genuinely believe we can find a way. And I have a K-12 vision of like what we do in K2, what we do in 3-5, what we do in middle school and in high school that sort of leads to more student autonomy, independence, and ultimately like taking charge of that.
Yeah.
And some of that is like me pushing back on what I feel and experience from students who are just like, whatever, how much is this worth? And like weighing out if it has enough value to do the thing for the transaction.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay. So let's make the transition here to what you've learned about the teaching and learning of mathematics in high school and what you're currently learning about the teaching and learning of mathematics in elementary schools. Like
Yeah.
how are they similar? How are they different? And like then like what's joyful in both of them? Let's land in a joy, which is a word you use a lot. So like how are
Sure.
they the same? How are they different? And what's joyful in both those spaces?
Well, there was a while back, I think it was during a CMC Ignite talk where my whole point was there's no joy in learning mathematics, and unless we put it there was really the thing.
Yeah.
And I made a quick reference to looking at the standards, and the word joy or joyful or any derivatives doesn't appear at all. And so, maybe it shouldn't. Maybe that's not an appropriate place for it. But we elevate that document so highly, the standards documents, that it's like, if it isn't there, are we doing it? Are we accountable
Yeah.
to it? Should it be something we need? Um, but we find sources of joy in all kinds of places. Even in the world in which we live today, we're seeking opportunities to find joy, even within so much times of struggle and strife. But a lot of that joy in the math classroom just comes from working on students' identities, getting them to a place where they can reshape the way they think about themselves in the context of learning and particularly in how they learn mathematics. And I think that's the same at all levels. So students who I encountered in high school who came in with years of, I'm not good at math, I hate math, I can't do math, um, giving them opportunities to find success, to understand mathematics, like that's joyful. And I see that the same in terms of high school students than elementary, One core difference being you might have to nudge a little harder to sort of break through that shell with students who have experienced a lot of negativity or trauma in a mathematics context.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's so much here to unpack what I think I hear you talking about and when we're trying to center joy is like centering humans, right? Centering the humans in
Yeah.
the room, helping them understand that they can be successful or showing them the places they can be. So, how do you center the humans and what are some ways, both in high school and in the elementary work you're doing now, like that you can really center the human experience in the classroom so that they can experience joy?
Part of it is being attuned to the people in the building, right? If my
Mhm.
goal is to come in and work through this set of content, then I evaluate my goal based on how much of that content I got through and
Mhm.
maybe how students performed on it. But if my goal is to build relationships, to build people, as humans first, in the context of doing mathematics, then I'm evaluating it differently. I'm aware of different things. I'm noticing different things. And that's, I would say, always been one of my strengths, even when I didn't have a lot of, let's say, technical capacity in terms of teaching strategies and experience with those kinds of things. I was always well plugged into the people in the room. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the reasons that it's been an easy place for me to connect and to feel like, I can look back with a lot of regret on the things I didn't know, the techniques I didn't have. But that part has always been strong. Um, I see that in the same place now. Like I'm walking through elementary classrooms and like students come into school with a lot of joy. Like they love
Yeah.
learning, they love challenge, they love exploration. And I'm often sort of balancing out what I'm experiencing now in first, second, third grade classrooms with what I've seen in middle school and high school classrooms where that joy just isn't as widespread naturally. And now it's like it feels like more of a labor. And I'm thinking about where it happens. I mean, I'll never forget an instance a few years ago where a 10th grade student in a class that was called an honors class we were talking about the impact of grades, sitting around in a circle, and this student said, it was in second grade that I learned I'm below basic. And like he had
Oh,
taken it as a label for himself. And for me, that's one of like the most poignant characterizations of like the impact of our highly tested thing that's focused not on the humans in the room.
yeah.
But it's hard, in the context we are, not to sort of have a comparing and ranking system, right? Our
Yeah.
test scores come in green, red, whatever. And like kids identify those colors with something about themselves. And I think that's problematic.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to ask you the $1 million question, right? But like, how do we flip that? How do we resolve that tension? And maybe it's not the big how. It's like, what are some small things we can do? Because I know I felt that tension in the classroom. I know that like teachers feel that tension between, I need to know some sort of ranking system of my students so I can provide them the information they need. But how do I not transfer that sort of like label to a student as early as second grade, right? So, what are some ways
Yeah.
that you're working to do that?
Well, I think that it changes depending on where you are. Regionally, it's different than some places than others. I know that some of my friends on the East Coast have a lot more pressure in terms of how students perform.
Mhm.
That's not something that I've necessarily felt has impacted me in as a California teacher. It was like we cared about it. My principal cared a lot about it. We talked a lot about it. We attended to subgroups and how we could meet the needs, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't ever feel like I was being evaluated based on that. And so I
Yeah.
felt a little more free. Um, it's complicated. There's a part of me that says we're never going to lose the intention of the standards. It's too much in our fabric right now. So there's a part of me, my disruptive side, that's like, let's swing a little the other way. Let's overcorrect, find
Yeah.
us in the other side of things and be like, whoa, went too far and try to find that middle spot. But I think that one of the challenges is that we could be looking at those big test data, those satellite data, to give us indicators of what happened so we can evaluate it. But we need to see them as nuanced. We need to understand the narrative that surrounds them, why this year might be different from last year, and
Uh,
then just to use it as information for us, but not necessarily to attach it to students or
yeah.
to drive students in order to improve them. I mean, one thing we have is students learning at their own paces, students making sense of mathematics at their own rates,
Yep.
and the breadth of how much we have to expose them to in a school year means that not every kid is having sufficient time to make sense of those things to get to a place where they can show up as
Yeah.
mastery on a test like that. And that's a challenge. I don't know how we fix it because we need the humanity of us needs to offer as much time as students need, and the pacing demands on us mean we can't do that. So that's a tough one.
It is, and I think you're spot on. And I think the vast majority of teachers would agree with you that the time is the biggest tension here. The time of like making sure you prepare kids for this thing, right? Even if you completely disagree with this thing, the reality is they have to do it, and like you'd be doing them a disservice to set them up to not be to feel some kind of success on this thing, right? So that and the reality of like, no, we need to linger and we need to wonder and we need to like spend this time honoring who you are as a math learner, as a human, right? And one of the things that's always been helpful for me to remember, it kind of put me in my place. Like, yes, the work we do as teachers is incredibly important, right? But also, like, you're one step on a really long journey that this kid's on, right? And so, like, understanding that, like, all right, I'm not going to be able to do everything, even if I wanted to. My job is to, like, experience this moment with this human or the humans in the room. And then, like, I have to trust this inherently broken system that we've built that's going to keep going as we keep going on as they keep going on their journey, right? Like I'm not the be all and end all here. Um, let's let's shift a little bit and talk about today the work you're doing now with Nova Math. You get to go into a lot of math classrooms, and again, many of them are elementary schools. But what are some things when you walk into a classroom? What are some things that tell you students are really engaged in the work? What are there signs that you can see? I know you get to visit a lot, so what are the moments you look for when you walk into a classroom to see that kids are really engaged and not just kind of going through the motions?
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking for and I'm seeing that student learning, student thinking, and student discourse is at the center. Student sense
Mm,
making is the root of what they're doing. So I'm seeing a lot less of what I feel like I experienced and many of you experienced, which is here's how you do a bunch of problems, now go do a bunch of problems. And
hmm.
more, let's make sense of concepts and then see how they play out on different models and representations, right?
Yeah.
So an illustration of that is that I personally have been diving into elementary education by using base 8 math facts. And of
Yeah.
course, I don't have multiplication facts. I don't even have addition and subtraction facts nailed down for base 8. 3 times 3 is 11 in base 8. And like, that's one I've got memorized right now, probably from a lot of use. But if you ask me 4 times 7, like I'm gonna have to work at it for a bit.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so I'm using that context to dive into how do we make sense of this and how do we draw on other things to build meaning. And it's giving me an eye into the way students are developing understanding of using a number line. And that might start with a hundreds chart before we pull it out to a number line. How we use base 10 blocks. And I've got a set of base 10 blocks in base 8 that I grabbed some of those foam ones from Hand to Mind and cut them down to size. I call them base 10 blocks because it's still base 10,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
But I've been using these things to sort of push my own understanding and to go deeper and like, ooh, how would I think about fractions in this context? And that's what I'm seeing when I'm going into classrooms is kids are wrestling with concepts, they're making sense of it, and that joy is coming back.
Yeah.
So, in the middle school classrooms, my high school colleagues are still telling me like, oh, we're still in this challenging moment. Of course, there's elements that are always challenging, but the disruption that happened back in the lockdown of 2020, like those things are still with us and a lot of our students.
Yeah.
But I think we have an opportunity to start seeing, A, how do we approach that for the students that had those disruptive years and missed some of that fundamental sense making? And B, we can use our experiences to shape the experiences of our younger learners who didn't have that. And so I'm seeing sort of that balance.
Mm.
And it's encouraging, even though I know we still have a lot of work to do and we'll still continue to feel the pain that our students are feeling
Mhm.
from that disruption. But
Yeah. Gosh, Nolan, that's the first time I've actually thought about the fact that we now have, a larger group of kids who didn't experience that. For so long, we were talking
Mhm.
about like, well, today's third graders were
Uh-huh.
in kindergarten when this started, right? And we were always
Yeah.
measuring where they were based on what age they experienced that disruption. And now we have kids who didn't experience that
Yeah.
disruption at all, at least from a learning standpoint, right? That
From a
maybe
learning
they were
standpoint. Yeah.
born, but
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, we're gonna get to the rapid fire round really soon, but I have one more small question for you, which is I've been thinking so much about this. I read this piece, this article on professional learning, and like it just reminded me that like the vast majority of people that sit in professional learning are asking themselves like, give me something I can do tomorrow, right? Like that's what they want. That's what teachers want. And so for a teacher who's listening right now and they're thinking like, all right, this all sounds great, Nolan. I love the things you're talking about, but like, what's something I could try tomorrow that would be one small step in the direction of creating spaces that feel joyful and honoring, the humans that are in the room, all the stuff that we're talking about. Do you have a small tip we can get people started with this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put this in the context of if I'm coming in to do a model lesson with the school that I'm supporting, and the folks I'm meeting with are like, oh, we're using this new program of yours, and I'm trying to make sense of it, and the planning feels overwhelming. My number one go-to is just like be prepared to ask more questions. Right. So I know from my own experience, and I observe it in others, that like if we ask a question and we know what answer we're hoping emerges and it emerges, we're like, yay, the answer I was looking for emerged. I'm gonna acknowledge that answer and then move on to the next thing. And it's like an act, it's a practice or a habit to slow down and say, tell me more about that. Can you show me your reasoning? And then turn to another student and say, can you make sense of that person's reasoning? Right. So I'm always thinking about like communication and understanding as like two sides of a coin, where understanding part of it is making sense of other people's reasoning, and communication is articulating your reasoning so others can understand. And that conversation, number one, helps us establish mathematics as a community practice. No one needs to be getting right answers in isolation. All learners need to be making sense of mathematics together. And
Yeah.
so I might have a strategy that works really well for me, but I want a classroom practice that builds on like an expectation that I'm also making sense of other people's methods that might not be automatic for me. So that's
Yeah.
something I think you could do tomorrow, is just ask more questions and ask other students to articulate what they're hearing
Yeah.
from their parents.
Man, that's good life advice too, right? Forget teaching. Like just let's all ask more questions. Let's be more curious about the what we're engaging in. Okay. It's time for rapid fire round. If you're first time listening to Voices from the Field, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Nolan here an either or, this or that. And Nolan's goal is to give a one-word answer here. Now, we give a little flexibility here. If you need to explain something, we'll allow it, but we're going to challenge you to try and give just a one-word answer to these. Are you ready to go, Nolan?
I'm just going to say that the way my brain works, this is the hardest thing for me. I always see the gray area, and I'm a yes
It is.
and kind of guy. But let's
Oh,
get
we're going to start off with a hard one for you. Well, maybe this won't be hard. I thought it might be. It's worth noting that Nolan and I are both new transplants to the state of Washington. We're Washingtonians now. So my first rapid fire question for you is California or Washington?
I'm going to go Washington.
All
I'm
right. I
happy.
love it.
I love it.
I love it. Okay. Next up, grades or feedback?
Feedback, 100%.
I love it. Structure or flexibility?
Hmm. This one takes a conversation, right? But since it's
Bring
easy,
it.
my explanation, since it's easy to lean into structure and to over routinize things, I'm going to go with flexibility.
Okay. All right. Um, product or process?
Process. These are easy. Sometimes I hear the questions are a lot harder. I got
All
these
right.
ones.
All right. Let's go to this. A really lovely old fashioned or a bourbon neat.
Oh, this is a lovely old fashioned. And it's with
Okay.
rye. That's what makes that choice easy.
Okay. All right. Okay. Um, Desmos or whiteboards?
Ooh, okay, that's a hard one.
Good.
Desmos is an
Good.
amazing tool. I have learned and taught amazingly with it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go back to my old college days where we were trying to figure out proofs of things that made no sense to us. And it was like a box of pizza, an office in the library, and a whiteboard. I'm going to go whiteboard.
I love it. Okay. Um, Small group or whole class?
Hmm, that's a hard one. I'm going to go whole class, but that's not an easy choice.
Okay. Okay. Uh, do you want to start with a task or do you want to start with a question?
Ooh, I think I'll start with a task.
Okay. All right. You're getting some work done. Do you have music on in the background or are you working in silence?
It's never silent. There's always music. I can't read without music.
I love it. What, give us something you're listening to right now. I'm putting you on the spot. I'm
Oh
breaking the
boy.
rapid fire.
Well, I mean, I got my Jenny Lewis shirt on today, but honestly, like I've been in a Leve sense for like months now, and like I can't get enough of it. So
That is, yeah, lovely music. I love it. Okay, last one. Um, you got to work on a big project. Are you doing it in the early morning or are you doing it late night?
early morning.
I would have guessed wrong on that one, Nolan. All
Yeah,
right.
no.
Early morning it is. Okay.
It's late
The
night when the
last,
conference is tomorrow, right? When the presentation's tomorrow, then it's late night.
that's fair. That's fair. The last question we ask everybody is what's bringing you joy in math education right now? We've already talked a little bit about it, but I'm going to let you have the last word here with this. What is bringing you joy in math education right now?
Right now, for me, it's really making sense of a lot of mathematics in the context of base 8, like I talked a bit about. So playing around with 10 frames that have, well, what we'll call 8 spots,
Yeah.
making sense of it. I'm using those to do long division. So it's bringing me a lot of joy because I'm seeing a lot of things and I'm thinking a lot of things from a context of I don't have facts. So then how can I make sense of this? And I'm loving it. I just did a factoring problem in base 8 using algebra tiles based on base 10 blocks, and it was like it was all I needed. It was great.
Okay. I now I feel like I'm going back to rapid fire, but are you doing these on your own or are you doing them with colleagues?
I've started to like throw together some tasks and put in a couple conference sessions so I can do this more publicly. I've done a couple things. We had GSDMC back in February, and
Mhm.
I introduced a few tasks there. Some of the PD work that I'm doing up here in Washington, I'm using some of this. And mostly my thinking right now is as teachers, we talk about productive struggle, but I want us to really experience productive struggle, not sort of recognize it when we see it, but to feel it, right? So let's get in, and I'm going to show you a times table that doesn't make sense to you because it's in base 8. And then let's make sense of now what do we do? Let's go back and look at, right, the counting, deriving to mastery phases like we hear about in the articles. And like, let's make sense of counting in base 8. Let's make sense of 10 frames and a bead string and the number line and different strategies when you don't have facts. And I think that putting ourselves in a place of dysregulation,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I'm seeing primarily people that are, love mathematics, love teaching mathematics, and love to play with it. But there's other people that I see shut down real quick too. And it's like,
Yeah.
I wonder what it is about their learning experience that even as adults and teachers of mathematics, they're like, I got to throw my hands up with this one. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great spot to experience some real struggle so we
Yeah.
can think about how our students experience it.
Yeah, it's the very thing, Nolan, we ask kids to do every single day.
Yeah.
And not only that, we ask them to engage in something they've never done before, but then we ask them to turn and talk to their neighbor about it. And let me put your work on the document camera and show everybody what you
Yeah.
did. Like
Yeah.
that's got to be wild. I have
Yeah.
and to experience that again as a learner
Yeah.
is I think really powerful for what we should do. Okay. Nolan, as we wrap up here, I'm so grateful for your time and for sharing all this with us. Your willingness to like question what we think and know about math education as a whole has always really pushed me, and I'm glad that now our listeners get hopefully get pushed a little bit as well. But before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find you, how they can reach out to you, and what else you got going on.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I have a Instagram page. I'm mostly just a lurker though, Nolan Fossum Math on Instagram. But you can also reach me at nolan.fossum@anovamat.com. Or just search me up. I'm probably at a conference, so hit me up in the halls and we'll chat.
I love it. Nolan, thank you so much. And thanks to our listeners for being here live. And for those of you that are listening to the recording, we hope you will join us again for another episode from Voices from the Field. Take care, everybody.